Welcome to our first webinar for 2023. My name is Natalie, and today we will do some training on EFT processing for Sage Intacct AP payments. EFT processing for Sage Intacct was released in October last year, and we have been implementing sites in various countries with a few partners and end users over the last few months. Recent enhancements include support for Intacct advances and usability improvements. Today Anne will present two parts. A quick start video on installing customizations, configuring EFT processing for Sage Intacct AP, how to create an EFT file, and how to reprocess the files if required. We will then have some tips for consultants around EFT file formats and importing vendor details. Over to you, Anne.
My name's Anne from Orchid Systems, and today I'm going to run through EFT processing for Sage Intacct for your vendor payments. EFT processing for vendor payments allows you to create an EFT file in the format required for your bank. It is integrated with the Sage Intacct payment processing routines, and hundreds of bank formats are already supported, and others can be created on request. So we currently support domestic payment formats, cross-border payment formats, Positive Pay, in North America the NACHA and CPA 005 standards, in Europe and Asia the SEPA and ISO 2022 formats, the BPay format, etc. We also support user-definable formats. The EFT banking details for both the vendor and the supplier are all stored in the Sage Intacct database. And our EFT file format supports user-definable screen labels and fields to reflect the bank's terminology. First, we're going to install and configure EFT processing. Initially, you download and install the EFT XML file from the Orchid's website. Then once you've installed it, you can use the EFT menu to enter your license code, to configure the EFT formats that you want to use, to configure your formats for the banks that you are creating EFT files for. And then you would configure your EFT details for all your suppliers in Accounts Payable on the Orchid EFT tab. To download the Orchid EFT application, you need to first go to our website, orchid.systems, and log in as a partner. The product downloads are in the partner area. Then select Sage Intacct and then download the module. And once you download the module, you can then unzip the XML file from the file that you've just downloaded. And this XML file is the file that you would import from Platform Services, Install Applications, and then you would import that particular XML file. Select the file and click Install. And before we go ahead to do the configuration, we should check the other prerequisites after importing the XML file. So in the help, in the topic Importing the XML file, you download and save the XML file, import it, and then you need to make sure you have an Ajax web service user. So you go to the Company Setup, Company from the main Sage Intacct menu, and then select the Security tab and scroll down to find Web Service Authorizations and make sure you have an Ajax user. After installing the Orchid EFT application, the following role will be created for you. And then you need to go to the relevant users and assign this role to all the users who need access to EFT processing. And you do this by selecting the user, editing the user, and on the Roles tab, you would assign the role to that particular user. So here we have assigned the Orchid module to the user Anne. And after assigning the role to the appropriate users, you will have Orchid EFT under your applications list and also in your menus, and you can drag the Orchid EFT menu to where you want to work with that. And you also have an overview menu. The next thing to do is to enter your activation code in the EFT license screen. You can apply for as many activation codes as you need for all your different company IDs, either demonstration accounts or your customers' accounts or the customers' implementation accounts. Without the activation code, you can still do all the setup, but you cannot generate an EFT file or download an EFT file. All screens in the Orchid EFT application have a help menu, and when you click on it, you will get more information about the screen. And the help shows you where the company ID displayed on the Orchid EFT license screen comes from. And it's this which you need to send to Orchid to get an activation code for your demo accounts or your customer's account or your customer's implementation account. The EFT license screen also shows you when this license is due to expire and if there are any updates to the EFT application on the Orchid website, which you may wish to download and re-import through the Install application on the Platform Services menu. You use the EFT Format screen to maintain all the different EFT formats that you need for all your different bank accounts. To create a new format, click Add, and then you would paste in the format definition from the text file that we send you. In future, we will have a button here so you can automatically download that bank file from our website. But in the short term, you need to send us the specification that you need from the bank, and then we'll send you the associated format that you can paste in here. And in the meantime, if you go to the knowledge base on our website, you'll be able to find the knowledge base article in the Sage Intacct area on our website, which has some sample EFT file formats for you to get started. So it tells you how to paste it in, and it's got a few attachments for the Australian ABA, the Canadian CPA 005, the NACHA, and the SEPA or ISO 2022 for European and Asian banks. Once you have the file, you can copy and paste the contents into the EFT file format screen. So this is the CAN CPA 005, and we would paste that across into the Orchid Systems EFT format screen. So you can paste the entire contents into the format box and then set the name equal to the characters in the square brackets for the text and the description from the name in the quotes. In this case, the Canadian CPA standard CPA 005, the 1464 byte format. And because I've already got a CPA 005, I'm just going to call this one _demo, and then you'd save that format. And after setting up all the EFT file formats that you'd need, you'd then go and associate the file format with the appropriate bank. The reason why you can have multiple file formats associated with one bank is you may be doing wire transfers, domestic payments, cross-border payments, and positive pay all from the same bank account. So you need to be able to select multiple file formats for a bank account. Once you choose the file format, you would then go ahead and fill in the necessary information for that bank. The little black info, when you slowly mouse over it, shows you the help for those particular fields, and that can be configured in the EFT file format. You can predetermine what the file name is going to be called, and in this case, check the help for the different codes that you can use in your file format name. YYY gives you the year, MM gives you the month, DD gives you the day, and S gives you a serial number. And once you've filled in the bank-specific info for this particular file format, you'd go ahead and save the record. For more information on the EFT banks, you can click on the help. And this has more information on the fields you can use in the file name and the other fields on that screen. And now you would go and configure the AP vendors or suppliers that you want to pay using this CAN CPA demo file format. So you would select suppliers or vendors from your accounts payable menu, select the vendor that is required for that particular format, and then on the Orchid EFT tab you would select CAN CPA demo and then fill in the fields that are relevant. And as you can see, based on the file format, certain validations can happen, like the account number needed to be at least 3 digits and the financial institution ID at least 8 characters for this particular file format. So you'd fill in the fields that are made available for depending on the file type that you have chosen and save the record. Not only can your EFT file type provide validations on the account number and the branch number length, but it can also give tooltips or help on how the fields should be formatted. So for this USA Wells Fargo virtual card payment format, you need to specify the unique number assigned by the bank to this particular vendor. So this would be the merchant ID or virtual card ID for this particular vendor. So these tooltips can be included in the EFT file formats. For more information on the EFT file formats and what you can do with them, you can check the online help, and also there's a quick tip video on working with EFT file formats in Sage Intacct EFT Processing. And these custom fields can be imported along with the vendor's details. Please refer to our website for the quick tip on importing EFT vendors' details. And that's it for the configuration of EFT processing for vendor payments. Next we'll look at the transaction processing, how you go ahead to create an EFT file. The steps for creating an AP payment file for EFT processing is first in Sage Intacct, using the normal payment processing screens, you would enter, post, approve if you need to, your payments and advances. And then once those payments have been posted and the advances have been posted, you would use the EFT AP payment request screen to select the payments that you want to pay and click generate to generate the EFT file. So the EFT AP payment request shows you all the complete payments for vendors who have been configured for EFT. And then you would go to the EFT file list screen and download the file for the bank. And then using the bank software, you would upload the file to the bank's website or application. And then, if it has been imported correctly, you'd come back to the EFT file list and confirm the EFT file. And that is the normal processing for creating an EFT file. So let's go ahead and have a look how this works in Intacct. EFT processing allows you to select posted payments for vendors that are configured for EFT and bank accounts that are configured for EFT, and then format those according to the bank's requirements. So it's only these posted payments where the status is complete. These are the transactions that you'll be able to select for an EFT file. So when I go to Orchid EFT and then go to our EFT AP payment request screen, this is showing me in the date range that is currently entered here. It defaults to the last calendar month, but if you do need to, you can backdate this if you are not up to date with your EFT files. So if we go back to the 1st of November, we will see there's some additional payments here that we can include for the bank. So this EFT AP payment request shows us in your filter, based on the dates or the payment method or the currency or the bank code, etc. Based on your filters, it shows you all those payments that have been made to a vendor that is configured for EFT. So if I go and look at this particular Broken Hill Properties account, I can see that on the Orchid EFT tab that this particular vendor is configured for the Wells Fargo ACH format. And for a posted payment. So if I drill into this particular payment, we can see it's a posted payment in Sage Intacct. And for a bank that has been configured, in this case for the Wells Fargo ACH file. And this is the Wells Fargo virtual payment file. So for all your vendors who've been configured for EFT, using a bank account that is also configured for EFT using the same file format, you will be able to select these payments and then include them in an EFT file. We could select all, or we could just select a handful. And in this case, when I click Generate, I'm going to end up with 3 EFT files because I've got 3 different file formats here. So you'll get a file per bank account and file format that you have selected. And once the file has been created, these 3 payments will now drop off this list as they are included in a file. So you're only getting those payments which are posted for vendors that are configured, for bank accounts that are configured, and that are not in any EFT file. But if I was to select those already included in an EFT file, I would now see those 3 payments being included today, as well as the past payments that I have, together with the EFT file number that they're included in. And now we would go to the EFT file list screen. And based on the filters, so I'm only looking at my own files, we see all the files in this particular filtered range. So here is the 3 new files that I've just created. The status is new, and I can drill in to see the bank details or the format details if I need to. And I can view the contents of the file. So here I would be able to see the bank details that are being included in this file. So this is from the EFT bank record, and then this is from the EFT vendor record and payment record. So we can see the details that will be included in this file. And if we're happy with that, then we can just click download. And when I click download, it's going to download that file onto my local drive and call it the name that I, based on the file naming convention I had on the EFT bank. And if I open this up, I will see that it's formatted based on the way Wells Fargo needs this particular transaction or transactions formatted. So I'd go ahead and upload that into my bank software, and if it was successful, I would come back here and click confirm. Before I click confirm, you'll see the status is currently exported. So when I click confirm, the status will become confirmed. So once it's confirmed, I can still view it, and with security clearance I can download again, but there's nothing more I can do with that particular EFT file. And that shows you the normal processing when you post your payments, select the payments for an EFT file, generate the file, download it, import into the bank, and then confirm all was okay. Next, we're going to run through what happens if the bank says there's something wrong with the file. For example, you may have had a payment date in the past, and most banks would reject that. So what do we do now to go and change that file, and how is that all kept track of, and how is it audited? In the scenario when you upload the file to the bank, and the bank says there was an error, for example, the payment date was in the past, Or maybe when you're downloading the file, some of the EFT file specification validations are not correct, and you might get an error message while the file is being created too. So in either of these cases, what you can do is go ahead in the EFT file list screen and hold the file. Hold means you can now go and change some of the details, maybe the EFT bank details record, maybe the EFT vendor details record, or maybe the effective date if you're using that for your payment file. And then once you've held the file, you would go to amend the EFT bank details, the vendor details, or the payment details for the effective payment date, and then you could go ahead and refresh the file, which gives it a new file with all the new details in, and the status is new, and you can come back and download, import into the bank, and if successful, confirm, or if there are more errors, go through that loop again. So let's see how that works in EFT processing. Going back to our EFT file list and having a look at the two of the other files that we generated earlier, we have got this file that we can view or download. The status is still new, and this file we could view or download. The status is still new. So assuming I go ahead and download this particular file, and when I open the file I notice something's wrong with this file, or perhaps when I upload to the bank I get an error message that the payment date is in the past. So what I can do is come and hold this file. So its status is exported, so once a file has been exported you can come and hold the file. So if I hold this file, you'll notice the status now becomes on hold. And at this stage I can refresh the file. But I need to do a change before it can be refreshed. If I click refresh now, it says that no data is changed, so it won't create a new file for me because it recognizes none of the data has changed. But if I do a refresh, for example, I change the effective date of this particular file and I know my file format is using effective date, or I go back to my vendor or bank and I change some details. And now when I click refresh, it will make a copy of this existing file with the status of replaced and create me a new file with the status of new with the newly refreshed data. And I can now go and download this and upload to the bank. And it'll now have the effective date of the 16th. And assuming it's accepted, I would then come and confirm. But if I view the contents of the file and I see here's my ARP file for Wells Fargo, and I see I've got my bank details and I've only got one payment, but I recognize that I actually wanted to do 2 payments to the Broken Hill in this particular file, what you can do is delete. And what delete means is this file is still kept. We know that it's by the status it becomes deleted. We can still view what the payment details were, but that particular payment is back on my EFT AP payment request, so I can select it with other payments. Payment for Broken Hill, the ARP format is back on this list. I could select that one and go ahead and generate a new file with those 2 transactions in. Generated me one file. Those 2 payment records will drop off this list, and on my EFT file list I now have a new file with 2 payments in, and when I go ahead and view it, as you'd expect, I've got both payment details sitting here. And that wraps up our error handling with the EFT files if the file is rejected by the bank or you get an error message when downloading. I'm now going to hand back to Natalie to introduce some more topics for this training webinar.
Thanks, Anne, for this quick start training video on configuring and using EFT processing for Sage Intacct. Now we will review some tips for consultants, starting with EFT file formats. EFT file formats are at the core of what EFT processing is doing, and with over 800 formats built and tested with Sage 300, using the same mapping engine for Sage Intacct, we thought it would be relevant to give you an idea of the structure of the file formats in more details. We will then go through importing vendor details, as it is a common support question when implementing EFT for Sage Intacct. Over to you, Anne.
Welcome to the Spotlight On video. In this video, I'm going to run through the EFT file formats in Sage Intacct. My name's Anne from Orchid Systems. The purpose of this video is to give you an overview of the EFT file formats to demystify them. It's not exhaustive training. The EFT file formats, in essence, format the payment details according to the bank's specific requirements. You should send us the EFT file specification from the bank, and then we will match it to one of our existing EFT file formats and tell you which one you need to use, or if we don't have it, we'll create a new EFT file format for you. The EFT file formats are also user-definable, so if you want, you can either create your own or adjust ours if you want to. The reason why you may want to do changes to our existing format is to put some site-specific modifications for the format. For example, the validations might be slightly different on one particular site. Or you may want to create a completely new specification. There is no charge from Orchid in creating new EFT file formats. Apart from formatting the payment details according to the bank specification, the EFT file format also allows for validations for the data entry. So while you're entering the EFT details, if there are specific validations from the bank, we can implement them in the EFT file, and we can implement them in the capture of the data. And we can provide help on the data required during the data entry. So if the bank said a field needs to be 450 or 460 to indicate the file payment type, then we can put that in the tooltip. So looking at an example file format, I'm going to describe the different sections of the EFT file format. You have the format name, which is in square brackets in the file format box, but just the name that they can select from the Finder when applying it to banks and vendors. We have a description, for example, the Canadian CPA 005. And then we have a section for the extra field declarations, validations, labels, and help tips. So on the right-hand side, you can see the BSB size equals 8:9. The BSB size is the bank branch size. And according to the CPA 005 standard, all bank branches should be between 8 and 9 digits long. So we can put that validation into the file format. And the account size is, according to the specification, between 3 and 12 digits long. And then we've got BSB number equals, and then we've got the financial institution ID transit number. So this means instead of being called branch code or sort code on the screen, the field will be labeled financial institution ID transit number. So when you have the field name equals and then a text, that will become the label for that particular field on the screen. Another example of an extra field on the bank record, on the EFT bank record, we have an AP payment reference field plus 9 extra fields on the bank record. 1 to 9, 10 extra fields for the EFT bank. And another example of that is using bank extra 1 for the destination data center code. So by typing in bank extra 1 equals destination data center code, that will be the field label. And then the bank extra 1 tip shows us that when we mouse over that, it's going to say, please contact your bank for the destination data center number. And another example using Bank Extra 2 is for the short name. So the field Bank Extra 2 will be labeled short name, open round brackets, 15 characters on the screen. And then we'll have a look at the row declarations. So you have header rows, which might just be called header equals, and then open quotes and all the fields that you want in the header row. Or if you've got multiple header rows, it might be header 1 equals and then header 2 equals. Or if you've got specific header rows for accounts payable and accounts receivable, you might have header AP, as I do have here. So header AP, that's our row, and it starts with the characters A, 10 zeros, 1, and then the originator ID formatted over 10 characters, etc. Then we have detail rows, which might be detail equals, or if you've got multiple detail rows, detail 1 equals, and then detail 2 equals, or in our case, detail AP equals. So our detail row starts with C, then it's got the record count, then the originator number, formatted over 10 characters, and so on. And then you have footer fields, and in our case, the footer field is going to start with Z, then some zeros for the record count, and then the total, transaction total, etc. And in all these rows, you have a number of different files or records that you can extract values from. You've got a list of fields that you can pick up off the company record, the name, the address, the tax number, some system-wide fields like the effective date, the EFT bank fields like the name, the branch code, the account number, the address, the extra fields 1 to 9, the file sequence number. On the EFT vendor or customers records, we've got the name, the branch code, the account number, the addresses, 1 to 4, postcode, etc. And we've also got an extra 50 fields, so extra 1 to extra 50. And we've got for international payments, we've got the IBAN and SWIFT numbers. From the payment itself, we can pick up the payment number, payment amount, the currency, description. And some of the fields on the applied invoice document are the invoice number, invoice description, invoice date, or the invoice net amount. You've also got the invoice due amount and the discount taken. So all of those can be included in the bank file if they're needed. So let's go ahead and see how this EFT file type works against the vendor and bank records. So looking at that EFT file format for the CAN CPA 005, we will now go and assign this to a bank and make sure that we get the Bank Extra 1 field being turned on for the destination data center code, and we get the tooltip, and Bank Extra 2 becomes the short name. So on our EFT banks, and looking at the 100 CPA 005, we have the financial institution ID and transit number, which we know is the label that we set for the BSB number and the account number. And we can see the Bank Extra 1 has been labeled Destination Data Center Code, and please contact your bank for the Destination Data Center Code is the tooltip for that. And Bank Extra 2 has been labeled Short Name, 15 characters. And in accounts payable on the vendors or suppliers, on the Orchid EFT tab, when you select the appropriate format for that particular vendor, then the fields will be labeled accordingly. So when we select CAN CPA 005, you will see that the account number must be at least 3 characters, a validation in red until such time as we fill in an account number. The branch number or the financial institution ID must be at least 8 or 9 characters. The field is labeled financial institution / transit ID, and once we key in the correct values, then the red validation goes away. For more information on the EFT formats, go to the Help. So from the EFT Format screen, click on Help, and you will see more details on the overall structure of the EFT format file, the actual structure itself, and all the different field names from the different files. So if you want to see what fields you can use from the payment entry or from the vendor's record. Thanks for your attention in viewing the spotlight on the EFT formats in Orchid's EFT Processing for Sage Intacct. For more information on EFT Processing for Sage Intacct, please go to our website. Welcome to the Spotlight on video on importing vendors' EFT details using EFT Processing for Sage Intacct. My name's Anne from Orchid Systems. The vendor's EFT details can be imported. The Orchid EFT tab on the vendor or supplier record is added when the EFT application is uploaded. The extra fields consist of fixed fields like the bank branch number, account number, IBAN, SWIFT code, etc., but also up to 50 extra or variable fields that can be turned on or off by EFT file format. So per format you can turn on any number of these 1 to 50 fields. You can give the field a label and a help tip for data entry, and you can validate the field length if required. And you can import data into these extra fields. All of these fields are custom fields on your vendor or supplier record. So the example we're going to use is this USA Wells Fargo payment method for the ACH. And you can see we have, apart from the account number and the bank transit number and the account name and bank name, we also have a payment reference, a merchant ID, an SEC code, which needs to be CCD for a corporate credit or PPD for a prearranged debit. And we also need to know the account type, whether it's a savings account or a direct debit account. The steps to import the vendor's EFT details are as follows. First, you upload the Orchid EFT application, and then you would go and create the EFT format or formats that you need. The Orchid application adds the custom fields to the vendor or supplier's record, and you would go and assign an EFT format to a vendor or a number of vendors if you've got multiple formats. So you've got a sample data entry to follow with your import. Then you'd create a view and export this example vendor's EFT details. You'd create an import template for your suppliers or vendors. Then fill in the details from your example export as an example row for all your other vendors that are going to be using the same format structure, and then import the vendor EFT details using the normal supplier import. Having imported the Orchid EFT application, we now have the Orchid EFT menu, and we'd go ahead and import or upload or create our EFT file formats. So the one I'm going to be using for example purposes is this Wells Fargo DAC format. So having a look at this format, we see we have a number of extra fields on the bank, but more importantly, a number of extra fields on the vendor that we saw in the screenshot. So vendor extra 1, vendor extra 2, and vendor extra 3 are all used on this vendor code. So now we would use this file format and go and enter one particular supplier's details. The supplier I'm using is 3008. On the Orchid EFT tab, I've selected the USA WFPM DAC format, and I have the fields that I need to fill in together with the tooltips on how to fill them in. So I'd fill in this one vendor as a sample record, and then I would go and export this. So back on my supplier list, I've created a view for my EFT details, and I selected all the custom fields that EFT added. We can see them here. So for my supplier 3008, I'm going to export a sample record. And this is what I'd use as my template for my other suppliers. So I can see which fields I need to fill in and what values they need to have. I would remove all the columns which are blank as they're not needed. And the EFT file format, although it exports it as an ID, we need to replace this with the relevant Wells Fargo code. And we don't need the export URL, so we could delete this as well. So this is what I'd use as my template. And then I would map these columns onto my import template that I create from Sage Intacct in the company import templates area. So going across to our company import data for our suppliers, we would create a template. And this template has all the supplier fields, including the custom fields that EFT has added. Here are all the EFT fields. So we would remove all the standard fields that we're not going to try and re-import unless you're doing this as part of your vendor take-on. So you would leave just those EFT fields that we have on our other spreadsheet. So if we don't need extra 23 and 24, etc., we would remove those and just leave the fields that we do need. Copy and paste across from our filled in spreadsheet and then import that spreadsheet. Or save as a CSV and then import that CSV. Just quickly something to highlight. As of the 16th of January, this particular column cannot be imported. So all the other extra fields will be imported, but Sage Intacct has a bug on importing lookup fields on the custom fields on the vendor's record. They are working on this issue and soon we'll be able to import that field. But in the meantime, you can import all your other data, and then you'll have to circle back and set the file format manually on the vendors after importing all the other details. We will let you know when Intacct has released a hotfix for this, and we will put the message up on our website too.
Thanks, Anne, for the tips to import vendors and understand EFT file formats in Sage Intacct. For more information, go to the Orchid website, orchid.systems, where you can find resources including today's videos and training guides. We can now open the webinar for questions.
Okay, so now it's time for questions, and hopefully we can all see Anne's screen now. So let's go. So first, yes, we will send you the recording to the webinar, and being a training video, it will also be available on in the Intacct help. We've looked at importing. The first question relating to import is, do you think we can import the file format name via the API?
Yes, I believe you can. So in the short term, while we can't import through a CSV, you should be able to set it either through custom reports or through the API, through an API call.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a few questions around EFT file format. First one, if the customer is using Orchid EFT in Sage 300, can we copy the bank format from the formats into Intacct?
Yes, you can, but yes and no. So the formats that are interchangeable are from product updates in Sage 300 EFT in the last 18 months or so. So as long as you're using a product update since then you'll be able to copy it across. But really the best, and your customer may be using a user format as well. So the best thing to do is to let us know, send us the bank specification, so the actual specification from the bank. And if your customer is using a user format, send us that, and then we will confirm which format you should use from the updated formats. Essentially, it needs to have this render API command because that means that it's usable by both Sage 300 and by Sage Intacct. But we need to make sure that we're using the right fields for Sage Intacct. So yeah, send us the user format, send us the bank spec, and we will send you the appropriate EFT format to use.
Okay, thank you. So does the vendor EFT file format have to match the bank's EFT file format? So what happens if, oh no, sorry, I think the other one is the next question, sorry. So yeah, does the vendor EFT format needs to match the bank EFT file format?
Yes, so on the vendor, I think I understand that question. So on the vendor, on your supplier, on the Orchid EFT tab, so let's just choose one of the suppliers that we're working with. So the EFT file format code that you have here must match the EFT file format code that you've associated with the bank account. So my 100 USA bank account would be configured for USA WF ARP. And then when I do payments, and where you do that is in the EFT banks. So in our EFT banks for 100 CHK, I would find the Wells Fargo ARP. So yes, the USA WF ARP needs to be, the EFT file format name needs to be on the vendor, needs to be on the bank. And when I do a payment from bank 100 to a vendor which has this EFT format, and this EFT format is configured against the bank, then we get that one coming through.
But it's really the vendor format that's driving how we generate the files, isn't it?
Well, it is, but they need to be the same. So you need the same format code on the vendor and the bank. But I think what you're alluding to is that the bank can have multiple formats. So for against my 100 CHK format bank, I will be doing Wells Fargo domestic payments, Wells Fargo the virtual card payments, as well as the Wells Fargo ACH file. So you can have multiple formats associated with the same bank, but only one format associated with the vendor.
Okay, well, that leads us to the next question. In the future, will we be able to assign multiple file formats per vendor? For example, if we are sharing a vendor between entities, but each entity pay their own invoices and they may have different details.
So because in Sage Intacct on the vendor, on the payment, there's no way you can indicate who it's for. There's no remit to code. So what you need to do is set up your vendors with, you need to have a different vendor code per entity, and then you can still group them together using Sage's parent account. So I might have multiple Broken Hill accounts, each with a different bank account and EFT format possibly associated with it, but I can link them to my parent Broken Hill account. And then, so I can still view all of my vendors that I've associated with Broken Hill. I can still view them all together, but I can have bank account details for each of the individual entities within that.
Okay, thank you. What would happen if the vendor is in NACHA and the bank is CPA 005 and both have the same currency?
So the vendor is in NACHA, so that's the North American Clearinghouse, and the bank is in CPA 005. That's not a valid setup. So both the vendor and the bank would both have to have NACHA set up against it. And it doesn't matter the currency, it just matters the file type. But when you are talking about currency, some EFT bank files has the currency on the header. So you have to group all your payments with the same currency together. But a lot of other bank formats have the currency in the detail line, in which case you can, as long as your bank account supports payments in multiple currencies, you can make those payments and send it to the bank, and they can make payments in different currencies.
Okay. Just a question confirming that you support AP advances, and is there anything special we need to do to enable EFT on AP advances?
No, there's nothing special to do. So when you do an AP advance, or you do a payment by record transfer, or you do a check, they end up in this accounts payable posted payments list. So these chunk here are advance payments. These are just normal record transfer payments, and some of these, in here we also have checks. So as long as the payment is either the advance, the record transfer, or the check is posted, that means it's approved, entered, approved, and completed. So as long as it's showing in this posted payments list with a status of complete, then you'll be able to select that to be included in an EFT file of our selection criteria, of our selection screen, EFT AP payment requests. So this shows all posted payments. So it includes advances, checks, and record transfers for vendors who are set up with an EFT file format against a bank that is set up with that same EFT file format. And then we could create an EFT file on these, in this case, these 3 payments.
Okay. Will you support employee expense payments at some stage?
Yes, if you have a look in our knowledge base, we've got a KB article on all our roadmap for EFT processing for Sage Intacct. So we're currently working on AR direct debits, and then the next major thing after that will be employee expenses. And in between that, we will be doing customizable remittance advices, the ability to SFTP the bank file, and we are going to include some additional security features around who can view and edit the bank account details, as well as some exports of the audit trail of these records that are being updated.
Great, thank you. Currently, we cannot configure Orchid EFT when we slide in via the partner console. Will this be fixed in the future?
Yes, that is something we're working on as well. So at the moment, you need to configure Orchid EFT as a as a local user account with security clearance, obviously, to access the EFT objects. But we are working on being able to provide admin access for the slide-in accounts.
Are there any reports that relate to the processes done from Orchid EFT?
No, there's no reports as yet, but you can use the custom report writer to write reports on these custom objects.
Okay, and I guess the related questions are the fields, the extra fields that we added to the EFT, to the AP vendor, accessible to add to custom views?
Yes, there are, and I think we saw that in the custom view that we had on the vendors. So on the AP vendors, we did add a custom view for our EFT details. And these are all the extra fields from the Orchid EFT tab. So yes, these are normal custom fields, and you can add them into your views.
Okay, perfect. I think there's one more question that relates to the EFT file list. On the line that says replaced, how can we see which file is being replaced?
So on the EFT file list, if we've needed to hold the file and then refresh it, so hold would make the status on hold, and then we change the data and we click refresh, you would end up with the one that you held and refreshed. Its status would become replaced like this, and the new file would have a history. So this was when it was created new, it would show you when you click on the history which file it replaced.
Okay, perfect. I can't see any other question. Let me have a quick look, make sure we've addressed them all. But if we haven't, or if you have a new question that comes up, please contact us, support@orchid.systems, and we'll get back to you. Yeah, I think that's all the questions for today's webinar. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one in mid-February.